1981 Honda Express SR NX50M. They only made this model in 81 and 82. That's it. So it has electric start, which was the first, because the Expresses before this did not have electric start. They just had kickstart. But this one does have a kickstart. So, excuse me. So my niece wanted a moped, so I figured I'd pick up a cheap moped and fix it up. So I browsed Craigslist and OfferUp and came across this for $200 with no title. So I zipped on out. He insisted that it was not stolen. He wrote me out a bill of sale. He gave me his address, and he showed me his driver's license. And I took a picture of his driver's license. Excuse me, I'm a little under the weather. So I took it home. It supposedly ran. He fired it up and ran it, but the brakes don't work, and it's not rideable. So I bring it back home, load it on the trailer, and bring it back home and fire it up. It runs for about 10 seconds, and then quits. The carburetor floods. So at least I know that it runs. It just needs to have the carburetor run through. So I took the bill of sale and the moped up to the licensing agency and gave him the bill of sale. And the person that I bought this from was not the registered owner of this moped. He had never registered it in his name. So the licensing agency first tells me that I need to have a photo of the VIN of this vehicle and the license plate, if it has one. So I took it back home. I got the picture of the VIN and the license plate, and then they go into their system and they say that it has not been registered for for 2 years, 3 years. So they tell me I can either go get a state patrol inspection, or they can send the paperwork back to Olympia, to the main licensing agency department, and they can look into its history to see if it's stolen or whatever. So I don't want to take it to the state patrol inspection because nothing operates on the thing. It doesn't run. None of the lights work. The brakes don't work. Blah blah blah. So we send the paperwork off to Olympia. 2 weeks later, we get the paperwork back, and there is no record of it being registered for the last 7 years. So now I go back over to the licensing agency. They tell me that it needs to go in for an inspection at the state patrol. So we go online. We set up an appointment to get it inspected. And apparently, they said that it just needs to be put together. It doesn't need to run. It doesn't need to operate. Nothing needs to work on it. It just needs to be put together. So, long story short, I got everything put back together because I tore the whole thing apart when I purchased it, and threw it on the trailer. Took it down to the licensing agency this morning, and pull in there. The officer comes out. He looks at the VIN number. He goes into the office. He looks at his computer for about 2 minutes. He prints out some paperwork and hands me the paperwork. And now I go up to the license agency with that paperwork, and I can apply for lost title, and I can register and plate it now. So, but it takes 3 years to get the title, which is fine. I don't have any plans of selling it. I'm giving this to my niece. But if it had have come up that this was stolen when I took this in to get the state patrol inspection, they would have confiscated it. Nothing would have happened to me, but they would have confiscated it. So I guess my What I'm saying is, if you purchase something that is not titled and you don't have the original owner to write you a bill of sale and that has registered it, don't do anything to it before you get the state patrol, because it doesn't need to run or operate. They just need to see the VIN number to run it if it's stolen. So, because I have already spent quite a bit of money fixing this thing up. So, anyway, move on to number 2 as far as this machine is concerned. So this is a 1981 Express SR. They only made the Express SR in 82 and 81 and 82. So it's very difficult to get parts for this thing. So from front to back, I replaced the tires and the tubes. So those are $29 a piece. I sandblasted the wheels and painted them front and back. I ordered a fender off of eBay, a used one, because the front one is broken. You cannot get a rear fender, not even used. So I turned the fender around. That's why there's that mounting tab, because it used to mount in the front. I took the mud flap off of the previous front fender and put it onto the back fender, and then made a little bracket to hold the fender in place in the front. I made a heat shield for it. You can actually obtain a heat shield for, I don't know, I think it's about $39. Got some generic rear turn signals. The bracket was broke off, so I welded a nut on there and put these on there. I couldn't find square ones to match the front ones. I had to get some used lenses because lenses were cracked. I got new bulbs. This is not the correct headlight because they want $37 for a factory headlight. And apparently because this model is the only model that if you run this without a battery in it and just kickstart it, it'll burn the headlight out. And for some reason, this model is the only one that does that. So this is actually a headlight that you can just replace the bulb. You don't have to replace the whole headlight. You just replace the $3 bulb. So that was $29. So we got $40 for each wheel for tires and tubes. It's just a lot of miscellaneous, little tiny $29 expenses with $8 shipping that has been dumped into this. I had to put mirrors on it. Those are not correct, but I don't want to spend $30 a piece for. I had to buy used cable for the front that was operational, and I had to buy a new generic rear cable and then weld up a bracket because the cable is about 2 inches too short. And they do not make, you can't find an NOS cable for this thing. They did have a front cable that was $75 on eBay, and I'm not going to pay no $75. So luckily I found the used cable that operates. The frozen up cables that I did have, I let those things soak in lubrication for a week and could not get those things to free up. So the belt, so you just take the however many bolts, I think there's like 6 or 7 bolts. You take the Kickstarter off, you pull that off, and then you take the bolts out, and you put your finger on the Kickstarter shaft and very gingerly pull this case off, and then your belt is in there, which you cannot buy a factory belt for it. But the Gates 9290, yeah, or Napa 25 9290 belt works. It's not as wide as the factory belt, but it'll work. They do not sell a belt for this thing. This whole thing, if you were to go look for NOS parts for this thing, there's very few parts that you can buy for this because it was only a 2-year run. The seat cover, I was very impressed with the seat cover. It's $29. There are little tiny tabs. You can't see that. See that little spike? You bend those out all the way around the seat cover and then pull the old seat cover off. And then starting from the front, you stretch it over the front and stretch it over the back and just push the clips down with a screwdriver and then work your way from front to back, side to side, stretching it, not necessarily as tight as you can, but taut. And that came out beautiful. And that is a factory looking seat cover. The fuel tank is incorrect for this, but I can't afford to spend any more money because I've got quite a bit of money into this thing with all these little tiny charges, numerous charges with freight and everything else. So it works, but it's not correct. I made a little battery box for it, put a new battery in it. It's oil injected. So I have a carburetor repair kit on the way. And this particular model, because of this bodywork on this Express, it's very difficult to get to the carburetor. So I'm going to pull the carburetor out and rebuild it. And the electric starter is turning over slowly. So they don't offer a new electric starter for it. So I'm going to take it apart and clean it up and see if it will operate. The brake light switches, I believe you can still get. I've seen them on eBay. If you go to the NOS new old stock parts for Honda, there's quite a few different distributors that make this stuff, make the switches. I put all new bulbs and everything, fix the crack in the brake light. But yeah, so it worked out for the best with this little Honda scooter. But if it was stolen, they would have confiscated it from me. So I would say as soon as I get done with the carburetor and the starter, hopefully it runs good, and we'll have a vintage classic scooter for my niece to ride at college. But anyway, there's my scooter story. Title and the rarity of this Express SR, making it a little bit difficult to get put back together. Thanks for watching.